debunkinkevin.org. Welcome back, everyone. 13 after the hour. And today in Behind the Headlines, we're going to take a look at the fear of big marijuana. This is something that's promulgated by Kevin Sabet and the prohibitionists out there, and it's written about expertly today by Jacob Sullum in Forbes magazine. His post entitled, "Fear of Cannabis Commerce Didn't, Won't, and Shouldn't Stop Legalization." I've posted a link in our chat room if you want to follow along, because some of the things he has to say are very, very insightful. Kevin Sabet tried to spin the disaster for prohibition that this most recent election was. He said it was not the complete slam dunk legalization groups expected, and I think we've slowed the legal marijuana freight train. In response to that, Jacob Sullum, who wasn't as sanguine about our chances of legalization as I was, and I was a little dismissive of even Alaska's chances, but Jacob's been very, very skeptical. But he says in response to Kevin Sabet, quote, "Sabet's spin seems delusional even to me." And he nails exactly what the problem is. And this is what I've always said is the root failure, the Achilles heel of the Project Sam third way thinking, kinder, gentler drug war rhetoric and messaging. The Achilles heel of it is it doesn't deal with the true harm of prohibition, and that's the market, not the user. Marijuana users are smoking marijuana in their homes and just relaxing and chilling and not hurting anybody. It's the market of marijuana, the buying and selling, the gangs, the cartels, the kids that are dealing. That's the harm of marijuana prohibition. And Sabet and his ilk don't see that, or they ignore that, and they just want to have these kinder, gentler policies. The way Jacob writes, he says, Sabet unrealistically expects voters to be horrified at the very thought of a profit-driven cannabis industry. Well, the problem with Sabet's notion here is that Americans, by and large, like capitalism. We like the idea of industries growing in America and creating jobs, and those industries being taxed to help the greater good. And that's an increasingly popular notion in America. Like we said, the Gallup poll came out today, once again reaffirming for the fourth year in a row majority support nationwide for marijuana legalization. Now, undoubtedly, Kevin will say, oh, well, the 58%'s down to 51%. What a dramatic decline of 7 points after they've realized that Colorado and Washington's big marijuana was a big mistake. Yeah, right, Kevin. All I see is that 2013 was a bit of an outlier in Gallup's numbers. When 3 out of the last 4 numbers are 50, 50, and 51, I think we got a pretty clear trend. But the problem for Kevin Sabet and the prohibitionists is the trend of younger voters increasing support for marijuana legalization and older voters dying. Retirees are the only age group in which a majority, Jacob writes, still opposed legalizing marijuana for recreational use. Only retirees. And as they die out, it's going to be harder and harder for the Kevin Sabets of the world to get any traction. And Sabet crowed about how 5 cities in Colorado, like Lakewood, banned marijuana pot shops. Ironically enough, that might actually be more support for marijuana legalization when people in these more conservative cities realize they can vote for legalization but still ban it in their own backyard. In fact, Oregon and Alaska, our legalization measures explicitly allow local bans. Now, in Oregon's measure, you have to get a vote of the people. You can't just have your 9-man city council vote for that. You've got to have an initiative. You got to have a vote of the people. Hey, if we had to get a vote of the people to legalize, you need to get a vote of the people to be able to prohibit. That seems only fair to me. But again, that local option is going to increase support for marijuana legalization among a lot of people. This idea that big marijuana, if you keep saying big marijuana over and over again, it's going to scare people, doesn't scare people when they recognize that most Americans, as Jacob writes, do not see business that supply them with useful and enjoyable goods and services as the enemy. And we've seen the results of trying to use the big marijuana as the scare against the voters. Alaska's anti-legalization campaign was called Big Marijuana, Big Mistake. Polling for Measure 2 was down to 48%. but it ended up passing with 52%. The same in Oregon. Measure 91 tried to show all the pictures of the pot tarts and the gummy bears and tried to do the same big marijuana, big mistake. Oh, if we have big marijuana, they'll market to kids. And again, our poll numbers were around 51, 52%. We end up winning with 56%. Both states did 4 points better than polling. And Mark Kleiman, the other guy, I talked about him yesterday, Mark A.R. Kleiman, the one who was the consultant to Washington State, whose advice led to low supply and high prices, as much as $30 to $35 a gram, who said, quote, "It can be done without involving the potrepreneurs now hoping to cash in on the green rush." He was referring to District of Columbia's grow and give system. The grow and give system, where in D.C. now you're allowed to grow your own, you're allowed to possess your own, and you're allowed to give it away, but not sell it to other people. As Jacob so expertly writes, quote, "There is another name for this form of legalization, prohibition. Back when the booze business was banned, people were still allowed to possess and consume alcoholic beverages, if they'd purchased them before the 18th Amendment took effect, for example. They could even make their own fermented beverages based on the Volstead Act's exception for non-intoxicating cider and fruit juices, which the Treasury Department interpreted to mean non-intoxicating in fact, leaving leeway for significant